everybody, Randy and Black with you here in the FN studios. We have a new UFC 170-pound champion, Tyron Woodley, getting the job done against Robbie Lawler. And I think we both picked Robbie Lawler going into this fight, but we were not surprised when Tyron Woodley, well, I was kind of surprised that he managed to take Robbie Lawler out so quickly, but I anticipated after George St-Pierre left the UFC that we would see the title change hands a bunch of times. Johnny Hendricks, Robbie Lawler, maybe Rory McDonald, maybe Carlos Condit. We felt that Carlos Condit deserved the decision over Robbie Lawler. However, Woodley, a new element in the game. I think when you think about some of the best fighters in the division, yes, he's now the king, but you get a stoppage victory over Robbie Lawler, a stoppage victory over Carlos Condit. I guess that means he's the man.
Yeah, he's the man. I mean, that was a hell of a punch. A beautiful, nice arc on the outside. Lawler likes to fight very linear these days. The shortest line to something is a straight line. The shortest distance is a straight line. So came around the outside, little footwork to generate a little power on there. It really was beautiful. 5 rounds today last week, though, where, we don't know what he's done in the last while, but would you be surprised Monday morning, in our case, Tuesday morning? Happy Simcoe Day, whatever that was. And would you be surprised on Tuesday morning if he knocked him out with a big right hand in the first round? No, you wouldn't, because he has that real power. He has that real ability to generate power, and he's been working with Duke for a couple years to be able to put himself in position to win that fight.
On top of that, the guys at American Top Team said that part of our success was because of Tyron Woodley, that he was around during the heyday of Dean Thomas and Eve Edwards and some of these emerging stars, that he helped them learn how to wrestle. He's been in that environment, an environment of champions for a long time. It was just, we were just waiting for his coming out party because, we saw him make the move from Strikeforce to the UFC. That didn't always work out for everybody. However, it worked out for Luke Rockhold and Daniel Cormier and Fabrizio Verdum, but you can't guarantee it. It's like MMA math. Some things work, some things don't work. When you look at the future for Tyron Woodley, I mean, this kind of opens the entire division up. Like, if I'm Rory McDonald, it's like, well, I'm the welterweight champion because I beat Tyron Woodley. So right now, it's a good problem to have if you're the UFC. Is Tyron Woodley the type of fighter, the type of athlete that the masses can get behind?
I mean, he's an exciting guy with a lot of power and a great highlight reel. Yeah, I think so.
Speaks well.
Speaks well. You also notice Cruz, Mike Bisping, Tyron Woodley, all these guys have spent time analyzing fighting now, being forced to look at fighting from a third-person perspective. And they've learned a lot from that. And Dan Cormier as well. It is not a coincidence that these men who are studying fighting from a different perspective, it is making them better. And that's a really interesting thing. And they're more famous, so it kind of works out for everybody. They end up sitting at a desk selling the UFC for it. So everybody's pretty happy with that, I got to think.
Tyron Woodley has already mentioned a couple of names when it comes to title defenses. He would love a fight with George St-Pierre, but who in the world would not love a fight with George St-Pierre? That seems to be the big money fight, especially if you look at the 170-pound division. But Dana White was confident when he said that George St-Pierre, he doesn't want to fight. He's not coming back to the UFC. And you would imagine that fight with Michael Bisping that was talked about would have been the fight to make if you were George St-Pierre. You have the opportunity to win a title in a different weight class, a huge money fight against the guy that talks up the game. I'm not sure that George St-Pierre is relevant when it comes to the conversation of a matchup with Tyron Woodley. However, Woodley says, I'd like to fight with Nick Diaz. It doesn't have to be for the title. It can be a catchweight bout. Do you like a fight with Nick Diaz? Because you and I were talking about it. Nick Diaz has one win in the past couple of years.
Yeah, he's got 2 losses and a no contest. And you know what, though? Everybody loves every fight with Nick Diaz. You do. But all of it's, hey, we talked about this earlier today. So let's just say the UFC says, oh, you're going to fight for the title. Outrage. There'll be outrage. You know what outrage does?
Perfect.
Sells pay-per-views. That's partly why when you see people debating things, what Chael Sonnen always says, if you can't argue over it at a barbecue, it's no good. In other words, people freaking out, oh my God, it's a travesty. That only helps the UFC. They understand that now. Big corporations, big people who understand media, understand that debate, outrage, anger, all of these kind of things help sell pay-per-views, and they're in the pay-per-view business. So you and I have for many years said we'd prefer that the best guys really got the fights, but that's not how it works anymore.
Is Conor McGregor, can he be part of that conversation if he happens to avenge that loss to Nathan Diaz at UFC 202? If he looks good at 170 pounds, is he a part of the title conversation? We know that after this fight, after he beats Nate Diaz, in his mind, he goes back down to 145 pounds to take on Jose Aldo, successfully defends that title, goes up to 155 pounds to face Eddie Alvarez, or who happens to hold that title at that point. You win that title, and then you go up to 170 pounds. However, if he manages to defeat Nathan Diaz, is he a legitimate challenge at 170 pounds for the upper echelon of guys at welterweight?
I'm a huge fan, and I've been working on breaking down Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor. I have a couple on the go, and I've studied that fight dozens of times, and all of his fights, and he's a brilliant fighter, and that very ability to dream big and chase big things is one of the things I love about him as a fan of this athlete. But man, 170 pounds, Tyron Woodley's a 200-pound super athlete, you know what I mean? And even just as you're describing it, fight at 70 and even go down to 45 and come back up, that's really hard on him. I know the man's still only in his 20s, but it's hard on you. You age rapidly doing that, so I can't imagine that's the best idea.
But everybody has a different angle. We were talking about Nathan Diaz and Nick Diaz. They don't even care about titles.
Nope.
This is not why we do it. We go in there to fight and to make money. We want the biggest fights humanly possible. For Conor McGregor, right now, he has the luxury of having 3 weight classes to choose from. How long can he sustain that moving back and forth?
I think this 70 thing, this is the last time you'll ever see that.
Even if he wins, even if he looks good.
Even if he wins, he's fighting just such a much larger man. Weight classes exist for a reason. You have to be so much better on the night than the bigger man. You can't just have a good night. You have to have a great night, and you have to exploit him. It's very hard to do. People don't realize how hard of an assignment this is. Conor realizes it now, and John, his coach, realize it now, and they're training for it specifically. If he does it, it's a brilliant accomplishment, and it sets up a third one between these two super freaks that people love and hate. Actually, with Nate Diaz, mostly they love him now. Nate Diaz is so cool, which brings us back to Nick. You want to see Nick Diaz fight. So if it's a Tyron Woodley fight, not for the title, I know people will freak out, but titles are a mechanism. Rankings are a mechanism. What matters in the end is the brilliance of the combat itself.
And I love that you say that. We're going to quickly wrap things up here. Marlon Moraes getting a victory over our guy Josh Hill, a knockout stoppage win. Marlon Moraes, World Series of Fighting. He is now finished with that contract. Who knows if he'll re-sign with this organization. He's clearly one of the best in the world. How do you feel he would fare in the UFC if he went there? This is a training partner of Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar was in his corner. This is a remarkable fighter.
My opinion is anybody versus Dominic Cruz is a bad fight for anybody. Dominic Cruz is a bad fight for anyone. But I sure would love to see it, you know? And wouldn't you love to see him fight TJ? Wouldn't you love to see him fight Uriah? There's a cool fight. That's the fight to make. If the guy is suddenly in the UFC, Uriah Faber.
And I would not be surprised to see Marlon Moraes sign with the UFC. That is it for us. Don't forget to tune in on Thursday for a 1-hour preview show as we get you set for all the fight night action between Yair Rodriguez and Alex Caceres. But the real main event, Cub Swanson and Tatsi Kawajiri.